Hello, everyone. Obviously, it looks a little bit different here. I'm recording from my hotel room, so I guess we're going to call this the hotel cast. I know Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick, they have their little car casts and all that stuff. This will be a hotel cast, and the lighting is actually pretty freaking decent. I will gladly take this any day of the week. But we have a lot to get into today. Kasperi Kapanen's new deal with the Penguins, 2 times 3.2. I'm going to get my thoughts on that, what the rest of the offseason could look like, and all that jazz coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to a Thursday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. So, it looked like, there wasn't going to be, too much news today, I guess, for the Penguins, even though I was going to obviously be planning a show no matter what, until Puckpedia actually was the first to report the Kasperi Kapanen contract. So 2 years, $3.2 million per. $3.2 million per. Sounds familiar to you all? Well, it should. Made that in his last deal when he was in Toronto and in Pittsburgh. So he's not getting a raise. He's not taking less money to stay. He is going to be making the same exact amount of money for the next 2 seasons. He will be a UFA at the end of this deal, no matter where he is, even if it's in Pittsburgh, somewhere else if he gets traded. He will be a UFA no matter what. So when I saw the deal, my mind immediately went to back when I think it was Bob McKenzie tweeted that Derek Englund signed. I think it was like for 2 or 3 times 2.9, and it was obviously that clip on hockey Twitter. That's per year. Yes, and they all just like laughed about it. And that's basically what I was doing. I'm like 3.2 million. I'm like, is that overall or is that per year? When I saw it was per year, I mean, my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe, and I still can't believe how is he getting the same amount of money after what we all just watched this past season. We can look at the data all day long, and I'm going to bring it up here for today's episode. We can watch him play. Obviously, people have different eye tests. I totally understand that. But, what this front office sees in him, I have absolutely no idea. I think this is, way too much for someone who cannot play above the third line on a Stanley Cup contending team. We have seen him play with Evgeny Malkin. Sure, he was fine in 2020, 2021, but he also shot 33%. I believe it was 33%, higher than his hour. I'm just making sure. I'm just making sure that I'm getting this right here. Real quick. Yeah. So, his shooting percentage was a lot higher that season. And I don't think, enough people are talking about it. Sure, had 30 points in 40 games that year. But, this year, barely even 30 points. And he was playing at least half of the season, or trying to, with Evgeny Malkin. I'm probably going to, drink a shot every time he comes into the offensive zone, stops with a puck, button hooks back, looks for a pass, instead of using his speed and his shot to beat defensemen and goaltenders. He was not doing that at all last season, and I really don't understand why. We can look at the data right here, compared to, the 2020-2021 season where he played in 40 games, compared to the whole 3-year data, 119 games. This is according to JFresh. So his wins above replacement was in the 78th percentile for that one season, 2020-2021. If you combine that season, a couple others, it drops down to 46%. Even the strength offense, 38th percentile for 2020-2021, 22nd percentile for 2020 through 2022. 10% for the first one, 35% for the second one. So went up a little bit there. Power play went up about 40%. That's better, but penalties was not, that's not really, it's whatever. But His finishing here is a big one too. For that 2020-2021 season, he finished in the 93rd percentile among finishing. Outside of that, down to 68. And that's not terrible, but it's still, a quarter of a difference. What he is at this point is probably what you are going to get. For some reason, I've had, I've been seeing some Kapanen Sims saying that, well, that was just a down year from him, and he's going to be so much better next year and all this stuff. And it's like, is he though? I'll be glad to eat my crow. But again, the underlying numbers and the counting stats for him, they were not good. He looked lost playing in the Penguins system last year. I know he drives Mike Sullivan crazy, and I'm sure he probably drives the front office crazy, but it's like, how are you then agreeing to bring him back? And not on a 1-year prove-it deal, on a 2-year deal. They're expecting him to bounce back next year. It's just, again, it's too much money for someone who cannot play above the third line. I would have spent my money elsewhere. Look what Nino Nierrdeiter got today. 2 years times $4 million. I had someone in my mention say, well, you're not paying taxes in Tennessee. Sure. Okay. I'm sure you also can probably get him 2 times 4 in Pittsburgh too. I really don't think for Nierrdeiter in that case, it makes that much of a difference. This isn't the Matthew Tkachuk situation here where he's just, talking about 7 different teams where you're not paying any income tax. I think Nierrdeiter just took the best opportunity that was available to him, no matter if it was in a state that doesn't have income tax or if it does. And the fact that he only signed for $800K more, man, that stings. It really does. I would much rather have him in this lineup compared to someone like Kapanen. If I have to watch Malkin play over a half a season with him on his wing, I might have to take matters into my own hands. And I think some others will probably have to as well. And, I think Hextall, he's had mostly a fine offseason up until this point. But, just a very curious move, a very confusing move. He should not be taking up over $3 million of this team's salary cap space. If you ask me, I would have been more comfortable taking Danton Heinen into arbitration at this point and say he gets $3 million there. Okay, rather him have it than someone like Kapanen. And I know I wasn't a fan of the Penguins qualifying Heinen because he probably would get a much bigger reward than the Penguins would like to give him. But, the opposite here, the Penguins honestly should have gone to arbitration with Kapanen because there was no way the arbiter was going to rule in favor of Kasperi because of how bad of a season he had. So I don't think this was good business by Hextall. I'm not a fan of this move. It was taking them a while to announce this. I'm like, do they have something else in the works here? But, they announced it, I believe like an hour after Puckpedia officially scooped it. And, this is, now they officially have, if you look at their roster, 13 forwards, 9 defensemen, and 2 goaltenders. So, what they have right now, it's almost, especially when you look at their salary cap situation, which I am going to get to a little later on for the show. But again, to wrap up this first segment, just definitely a very curious, weird decision by the Penguins. I really do not think you're going to see a better version of this player next year. And I would love to be wrong. Again, I have no problem, looking like a complete fool for, a player outperforming my expectations. I remember when I was on the podcast, I said Cody Ceci was probably not going to be that good. He comes out, has a really good season, and then gets paid by the Edmonton Oilers. I said Mike Matheson was, probably not going to amount to that much. He was sheltered on the bottom pairing, and he ended up having probably the best season of his career last year. So, maybe that's in the cards for Kasperi, but, the Penguins, they should have spent that money elsewhere. Is I think the main thing. What I'm trying to say. So coming up here in the next segment, we're going to get into the offseason, look at the Penguins salary cap situation, all of that good stuff. But before I get to that, from the people who invented healthy and tasty comes the latest gift to your taste buds. You've probably already tried the amazing coconut brownie chunk Built Bar, but guess what? Your friends at Built have given coconut brownie chunk the Puffs treatment. That's right, coconut brownie chunk Built Bar flavor you love and deliciously chewy marshmallow covered in 100% real chocolate. It's like a fluffy cloud of coconut brownie goodness. But stop drooling and listen. They are good for you, low calorie, low sugar, high protein, and they are all delicious. All Built Bars are made with protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Eat something that tastes good and is good for you. You can go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, I'm back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. You want to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Before I do get into the salary cap thing, I did notice something that I did want to talk about on the show. And, it's someone, I followed him on Penguins Twitter for a long time, Vinny Batts. Shout out to him for this. But, he also basically sums up how I feel. On this podcast, I said letting Heinen and Rodriguez walk, especially with the raises they were probably going to get, was the right call originally. I think Heinen was going to take the Penguins to arbitration, probably get $3 to $3.5 million. The Penguins weren't interested in doing that. Now, again, seeing what Kasperi Kapanen got, I probably would have preferred what Heinen would get in arbitration. Rodriguez, he had an up and down season, but he's definitely someone that I think could make $3 to $3.5 million per year as well to be a contending team's third line center. He is still not signed either. I'm okay with that. But as Vinny tweets, the Penguins, they didn't really sign anyone who could be the next season's version of them. And right now, even though it's July, making sure I have the date, July 21st, late July 21st, that is inexcusable. Hextall, he made a living with those bargain deals last year. And those are the kind of deals, that is how you build a competent, good contending bottom six. Dan Heinen comes in 1 year, barely even making $1 million, has 18 goals, still unsigned. Evan Rodriguez comes back for what? I don't even think he got $1 million on that contract. Comes back, puts up 40 points, explodes in the first half. Not as good in the second half, but then has a really good playoff series. There's also maybe still an outside chance that he could come back. But, two players that signed for cheap that well outperformed their expectations from the fan base. That is how you build a contending bottom six. And so far, what do we have this year? Drake Caggiula and Josh Archibald to probably be in the minors at this point. It's weird because you've had the space to do some of these moves. What changed in the philosophy? I mean, has Ron even seen those two players play? Because they have not really been good at the NHL level compared to someone like a Rodriguez, like a Heinen, who have had, experience scoring double-digit goals, as NHL players, so it's just really weird. And, when Ron was building, the roster last year, he didn't really wait to sign Heinen and Rodriguez. Remember, Rodriguez signed day one of free agency. He signed back with the team after he was traded for Kapanen when Jim Rutherford was there. And then, Heinen, a couple days later, out of the blue, signs a cheap 1-year deal. So, and I know there's a lot of free agents still out there, but, I just what would the philosophy for the bottom six change? Because, again, I'm a fan of everything else I think he's done. The top six is pretty freaking good. I think on a contending team, Zucker is a third liner, in my opinion. The defense, I think, is pretty solid, even though the Jan Ruda signing, like the player, after seeing all these moves and trading out some of the defensemen for other defensemen, it's looking a little more confusing right now, especially because he's making $2.75 million for the next 3 years, even though I do think he's going to play and he's going to strengthen that right side. Just definitely a little bit weird after seeing what they were doing with the defense. And now getting to my next point, which was the big topic for this second segment, Penguins are now over the cap by almost $2 million. I believe it's 1.5 to 1.8. I did say that there's probably means a move is coming, but also, which might be more likely, they may try to send some bodies down to Wilkes-Barre. I know Ty Smith is waiver exempt. He will not have to clear waivers to go down. I think Drake Caggiula, I believe he is waiver exempt. He can go down. He's on a 2-way deal. Archibald is one way, so I think he would have to clear waivers, but right there, that's $900K if he doesn't make the team out of camp. So I think at most you're only $900K over the cap. And then, if say Ty Smith doesn't make the team, and I think he will make the team, they didn't get him to probably just put in the minors, you can send him down, and then I think you are under the cap in that situation. So, but I think another big thing here with this, even though they can, get out of cap trouble by not making a trade, is, if they want to improve other areas of the roster to get that impact winger for Evgeny Malkin, I do think it's going to make that a bit tougher now. And I'll get to something in a little bit when it comes to opening more cap space that I saw from Frank Saravalli. I retweeted something from Mike DeFabo. I'll get to that in the last segment. Actually, it makes it even harder to move, money in and money out, especially with, teams in a standstill right now. You all are very much seeing the effect of a flat cap during this offseason. It didn't affect it too much last year because there's a new franchise coming in, millions of dollars of revenue. Teams were more than willing to, spend some money, even though you saw a bunch of it spent on day one of free agency. But after that, been very quiet. I mean, Nazem Kadri still inside, John Klingberg, all these other players, just because, teams that I think want those two players and other players that are unsigned, they haven't been able to move money yet. And I think for the Penguins, I do think they want to make a trade to bolster their top six, but they probably haven't been able to do that because I think other teams just don't want to take on some of their contracts, maybe like a Marcus Pettersson, maybe say like a Jason Zucker if he's able to get traded, though I do think he's probably going to stay. Brock McGinn, Brian Dumoulin, maybe POJ for like a young forward in the same spot. I said I'd be curious to see if Edmonton would ever do like a Jesse Puljujarvi for POJ deal. Don't think Ken Holland would be that dumb, but it's also Ken Holland after all. But I'm not as confident right now that they're gonna make a move before training camp, just because, again, A, they're over the cap, and B, teams, I just don't think they're gonna want to, add money at this point. Could be wrong. I do think, he's probably not done tinkering with the team. That's why I'm not really fully freaking out right now. I know the bottom six is really bad. But, again, he still has a couple of months to change that here, even though I think it's definitely going to be a bit tougher than some might expect. If you're out. That wraps up this small segment on just, the cap situation and the Penguins trying to make maybe another move to get that top six winger. I talked about Vladimir Tarasenko. He plays mainly right wing, but, I think he can also play left wing as well. You can also move Raquel to left wing. He's played that before too. So even if it's Raquel, Malkin, Tarasenko, that's just a beautiful line to me. But that's yesterday's episode. Of course, if you haven't listened to that, you can go check that out on the YouTube page or wherever you get your podcast. Coming up in the final segment, I'm going to get to something that I saw was thrown around today for the Penguins to potentially create cap space, though I'm going to give my thoughts on why you shouldn't expect a move like this to happen. So that's all coming up right after this commercial break. All right, I'm back here in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. You want to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. So this was interesting today. I did not know this when Frank Saravalli tweeted this. I'm going to try to find the tweet here real quick. So Saravalli says, with Kapanen re-signed, the Penguins are over the cap. There are options in October with Ty Smith, Drew O'Connor. I didn't forget to mention him. He is also waiver exempt, though, in my opinion, I think he's going to make the team. But he said with Kapanen's arbitration resolved, the Penguins now have a 48-hour buyout window opening in 3 days. Zucker, Pettersson, something to consider. In my opinion, Frank, and for all you all listening out there, it is not something to consider. There is no reason to buy out Marcus Pettersson or Jason Zucker. And I'm going to give you this tweet. This comes courtesy of Mike DeFabo. So Zucker obviously is in his last year of his deal, $5.5 million cap hit. Buying him out now, so he would have a $2 million cap hit this year and then a 1.73 dead. So yeah, okay, you save $3.5 million, but what are you going to do with that cap space? And then also, next year, he's still on your cap for almost $2 million. that just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't. I mean, and then for Marcus Pettersson, he has 3 years left at his $4 million AAV. If you buy him out, he would have a $1.34 million cap hit on the books until 2027, 2028. Yes, you heard me right. He will have that cap hit until I am checks notes 30 to 31 years old. I'm going to be 25 this year. That is not an option. Like, they are not going to buy out. I don't know, especially, Pettersson, even cap hit, he's still one of your best defensive defensemen on this team. Why would they even consider buying him out? Maybe if you can, I guess, get a forward for him in return, that's fine. But if you're buying him out for the sake of losing him for nothing, that's just bad asset management, because then your left side looks even weaker. You're going to be thrusting who into a top 4 role? Is Ty Smith ready for that, even though he wasn't good in New Jersey last year? I mean, is POJ ready for that? Is Mark Friedman going to be that player? It's just, yeah, I very much disagree with that kind of stuff. And then again, for Zucker, sure, you say $3.5 million, but he's still on your cap hit for this year and next year. And as I put on my Twitter account, it just, why would you, if you want to get rid of one of them, just, do it via trade, get something in return, like a top 6 forward, top 9 forward, something like that. It makes absolutely no sense to have dead money on your cap for years to come, especially in Marcus Pettersson's case, if you're just trying to open up salary cap room. And in case anyone forgot, excuse me, Jack Johnson is still on this team's payroll. Yes, I'm sorry I have to remind everyone, but I believe it is, trying to make sure here, I got this right from Josh Carney. Yeah, so $1.9 million this year for Jack Johnson, $900K about in the final 2 years after. The Penguins will be paying for that contract for the next 3 seasons. That is how bad, excuse me, buyouts screw you. Yeah, it's great that the player, like that, is not on your team anymore, but the fact that you're still paying that player actual money to not even play for you is what really stings, because I'm sure the Penguins could be using almost $2 million in salary cap space right now. Heck, if Johnson's buyout wasn't right there, they would be cap compliant. If you go to cap friendly, it'd be right around there, at least, that's for sure. So very much disagree with that sentiment thrown around by Frank Saravalli. Yeah, sure, it's open, but do I expect the Penguins to use it, Yins? No. I would expect both Jason Zucker and Marcus Pettersson to remain the members of the Penguins after that's up. If one of them is going to go, I expect it to be via a trade. So that will do it for today's episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Definitely a busy one, especially with Kasperi Kapanen, the salary cap, what this means going forward, looking at the bottom 6 and everything. And I'm going to share this with you all right here before I go, so you all can have a nice good night's sleep on Thursday for listening to this late at night, Friday morning when you wake up. From Danny Shirey, at least, Bronk McGinn, Jeff Carter, Kasperi Kapanen on your third line, Drew O'Connor, Ryan Poehling, Teddy Bluger, Josh Archibald for your fourth line. Hope you all sleep with one eye open. After listening or watching me say that, that is just that's the Jurassic Park meme when Jeff Goldblum is just looking at that dinosaur's poop, basically, and it's just like, yep, that is one big pile of what. So again, that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll hopefully do another one of these on Friday, as that will be, again, looks like the final daily episode before we switch to 3 a week next week. So thank you all so much for listening again. Love when you all comment on the YouTube page and sending me DMs and all that. If you want to keep doing that, obviously, please do. I'll try to like and respond to as many as I can. But thank you all so much for listening. I'll talk with you all on Friday.